Well, having a really solid business plan, knowing your competition, so doing a thorough competitive analysis and figuring out a good business model, having strong advisors, having a good team. I think really number one.
Hmm.
Those are all really helpful. It's not just an idea; it has to be very well thought of before you actually go and spend years and hours of your life into it. Yeah.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of the Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as a founder and CEO of Miller IP Law. We help startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. If you ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com, and we're always here to help. Now, today we have another great guest on the podcast, Hedieh Safiyari. And Hedieh, just as a quick intro, graduated, I think, college, if I remember right, at 16 years old, and she can correct me if I'm wrong, and then moved to Canada from Iran, got into competitive swimming and studied, I think, kinesiology. I had to take a second to remember how to pronounce it, but the kinesiology, graduated and worked for a private healthcare provider for a while. And then mom was going through cancer a couple times and found out about that and wanted a way to solve the problem of kind of how you're providing care and then how that system goes. So went back to school around 2015 and then started consulting with a healthcare startup. COVID hit and decided she would do her own thing. So with that, welcome on the podcast, Hedieh.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I just condensed is a much longer journey into a very short 30 seconds. So let's unpack that a bit. So tell us a little bit about how your journey got started in Iran and graduating from high school and how things got going from there.
Yeah, for sure. So I moved to Canada in 1996 with my family after graduating high school and sat in first year college here at 17. So that was challenging, starting a different language, first year university. And my background was in swimming, so automatically I was interested to learn more about the human body. So that's why I went into kinesiology. And ended up doing a master's in cardiac rehab, worked in private healthcare for 15 years in cardiac rehab. And on the personal side, during this time, a few years after we moved to Canada, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer, following by thyroid cancer a couple of years later. And it was hard, navigating the healthcare system because she needed different services. And initially I thought it's just because, my parents are not good in English and, all the burden is on me and it's just hard navigating the system. But later when I started working in healthcare myself, I realized it wasn't just us. It's challenging for everybody. It's not really clear where to start, especially when it comes to the holistic health services. A lot of people are not sure who exactly does what, where to start, because we were getting a lot of people who were coming to us saying, do you know where I can find a certain thing? And we would spend so much time on Google or asking around, and which was not a very good search, to put it short. So I always wanted to solve this issue. I didn't know where to start myself. I went back to school 2015.
Let me just dive in really quick there, because I think you've been working for 15 years. Is that right? Or how long have you been out of school working?
Around that time. So I worked as a clinician for 15 years. And when I was doing my MBA, I was still working. And it was a executive MBA, global, and we got to do different residencies across North and South America. Ended up as part of my project launching a digital health technology platform in Mexico City. And then after that,
just to dive in, just because I had a question on that, because so you were a clinician, worked for 15 years. Now, when you went to get the MBA, and then you were doing, as you mentioned, you're doing the MBA while you were still doing
Yeah.
clinician, your full-time job. Now, when
Exactly.
you went to get the MBA, was it, hey, I want to shift gears, I want to start working in the healthcare startups, and that was the intent, or is it just, hey, I'd like to have a bit more business background or another degree so I can get a promotion, or kind of what started you on the journey of getting the MBA before you dove into the startups?
Well, just to expand my knowledge on the business side, right? Because as a clinician, I had no idea, right? And because it was an executive program, the way it worked, there was a group of people from different industries, and they formed the groups based on your industry. So as a result of me being in healthcare for that long, I was given a project to work with a bunch of other people in my team that were coming from technology business background and me from health background to work with a real consulting project, which was a health technology startup. So that experience, I was like, oh, I can do this. I can create something like this and solve this gap that I've seen all these years. So after that, I got involved with startups, more consulting projects.
No, let me just dive in maybe with one more question, just
Yeah.
because. So you're doing the executive MBA, so usually that's nights or weekends, and you're doing your full-time job. You got involved, doing a bit of consulting with the healthcare startups as you're doing the MBA. At what point, or kind of what was the trigger to say, hey, I'm going to jump over to this full-time, or I'm no longer going to be a clinician? Or what was that transition? Was it just one day said, I'm done, I'm switching careers and I'm all out? Or is it, hey, I've got my MBA and I'm graduating, I got an opportunity, they made an offer? Or kind of how did you make that transition from doing clinician? I get that they're all related in the healthcare industry, but how did you make that transition or that decision?
Yeah, for sure. So after I graduated, in the same clinic that I was working, my role switched to another role, business intelligence. I was doing business intelligence for them, and and then at the beginning of COVID, a couple of years ago, right before COVID, it was acquired by a big corporation. And that's when my career ended as a clinician. So I was kind of, it was the perfect timing for me to say, okay, this chapter is closed, and now it's time to start this on my own. And it was right at the beginning of COVID, so it was perfect timing. So that's when Prompt Health started.
So I say, okay, this is perfect timing. So one is backing up just a little bit, and I get to the perfect timing with COVID and making that transition. But so you got the MBA, if I understand, went back to school, got that, started consulting with healthcare startups. Were you still a clinician at the time, or had you made that a full-time gig?
No, so when I finished my MBA, my role switched. I was working in business intelligence in the same clinic. And then when the clinic got acquired, I got packaged out basically. So my job ended there. And so I was basically, that was why it was perfect timing.
So now you say, okay, that's wrapping up. Now, when you got into it, how did you, there's a difference when you're working for someone else. And even if you're getting an MBA, doing a big consulting versus, hey, I'm going to start a whole new business and I'm going to get that up and running, build a platform and do all that. So as you're diving into that, how did you decide that that's what you're going to focus on, or that's what you're going to do? And how did you kind of get that ball kicked off of, it may be perfect timing, but you still have to figure out a whole bunch of how to get a platform up and running. So how did that kind of transition go for you?
Oh God. So starting from, the idea was there, and I was working on the idea and, making a business plan around it for a while. And I think the ideation stage takes a while, and figuring out the right business model. And initially I had a family member who was a technology expert, and I started the project with him to make me like a prototype. And soon I learned this is not a one-person job, and I need a whole team. So I outsourced the project to offshore, and to make like my initial prototype. And I had to build out like, an algorithm and start like surveying people and getting feedback and, create content and all that to give to this technology team that was offshore. And that took several months, and that took, of course, more than was expected. So it was initially supposed to be 3 months, it, ended up being 8 months. And it was very, very challenging working with offshore teams. So I got like grants through government. I was able to hire someone in-house and took over the project, gave it to this guy. And we started, making it better and improving it. And then I got more grants and I hired some interns to help me on the business and marketing side. And once we started getting some traction with social media and we already had our minimum viable product, that's when I raised fund. So I went for my first round, and I had, advisors that knew me and from both health and business background. And that's when I was able to, get more people on the technology side and build like both the tech team and the business team. And keep making the product better and better. And the technology side itself, I can write a whole book on it. And it will be a comic book because it was very, very challenging as a non-tech founder to build a technology company. And this is why, interesting to have this conversation with you, because I know you start with a lot of startups. You talk with a lot of startups, and people don't know the challenges behind the scene. And everybody is like, oh, we'll go start a startup. It's always easier when there's a co-founder involved, or and I was the only founder, so that was one of the challenges. So
now that you make the leap, you go into getting into the startup, doing the your own thing. You have the at least educational background, and you have the experience in the medical industry. You take the leap at COVID, start out as a one-person show, so to speak, and they're building that. So now kind of bring us up to where you're at today. So is it out in the market and you're bringing on customers, or is it launch? Is it beta? How's it gone? Kind of give us a bit of an update as to what the status is today.
Yeah, for sure. So we officially launched it in October of last year. So it's now just over a year into it. Prompt Health is about connecting people to all kinds of health and wellness services based on individualized needs, and enabling providers to promote themselves in a better way, because the market is very fragmented. So as we built that and we started, being more active on social media, and I have to say, I knew nothing about social media, zero. So I started, learning about all kinds of platforms last year, and living through COVID, that was kind of the only way to market yourself. And what we learned over the past year was that a lot of these health and wellness providers are either not on social media, or if they are, they're not super active. There's a very selected number of them that are active. And then the people that are super active are not necessarily expert health providers. The number of times I was in clubhouse rooms or things I see on TikTok, people giving mental health advice, and where we have counselors and psychologists not necessarily doing that, I was like, okay, wait a second, we need to make this easier so these guys actually do it. So we started having those conversations, did a survey from the providers on our platform, and did some focus groups. And we also have a podcast at Prompt Health where I interviewed 65 health professionals, and I did a number of live IG. So I talked to over 100 health experts, and I asked every single one of them, do you think it's clear? Do people know about your services and where to start? And they mostly said no. And I said, and then so on the survey, we said, okay, if what's the barrier in you not, giving more knowledge on social. And the biggest barrier was time. Because as we know, video is not for everyone. And it's, one of the main things that people are creating social media. So we said, okay, if we create easier tools on this platform that we've already created, so we make it easier for the health professionals to create content, that would be helpful. So over the past 6 months, we were, which brings us to now, which is the rollout of Prompt Health 2.0, which is our new version. We added content creation features to Prompt Health. So it looks very similar to Twitter or LinkedIn, where you can, provide, where the providers can provide knowledge in a form of like text or blog or event. Basically get to talk about their niche or specialty. When the clients are, looking for something, they get to learn directly from these guys that are already part of a vetted, trusted platform. And when the need arises, they can connect with them. So we made it easier. We just rolled it out. We're actually, talking about it on different platforms this week. We're hoping that more and more health, providers from across North America join us to talk about their specialty and their niche, so people can learn from them as opposed to having to randomly search for it on Google or hear from friends or places that are not necessarily by expert people.
No, that makes perfect sense. So, well, awesome. Well, that's kind of a fun walkthrough and catches us up to where you guys are at today and a little bit even where you guys are headed. So definitely it sounds like a fun journey. So with that, now we'll go ahead and transition over to the 2 questions I always ask at the end of each podcast. So with that, the first question I always ask is, along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made, and what did you learn from it?
The worst business decision was to work with an offshore team. It was terrible. And also, like, if I could have a co-founder from scratch, like from day one, I would have. It's kind of too late for it now. You can't go like after like a year and a half into a business. It's kind of too late. So the burden on a solo founder of working 16 hours a day catches up to you. Yeah. And so what I learned from it is surround yourself with a really strong team that you can trust from the beginning, and instead of trying to do everything by yourself. I have very strong advisors, which was very helpful. But yeah.
Awesome. Well, I definitely think that is something to learn from, and having that, there is a temptation with offshoring that, hey, it's going to be less expensive. Maybe it'll get done quicker and it'll be a great, great experience. And sometimes it's true, and you can find those teams, but a lot of times it's harder to manage. You have more of a language barrier. You can, you're not located in the same area. And so it does provide those, additional layers of work and difficulty. And sometimes it doesn't work out as well. So definitely makes sense that that's a lesson learned. So with that, now the second question I always ask is, if you're talking to somebody that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what'd be the one piece of advice you'd give them?
Well, having a really solid business plan, knowing your competition, so doing a thorough competitive analysis and teing out a good business model, having strong advisors, having a good team, I think is really number one. Those are all really helpful. It's not just an idea, it has to be very well thought of before you actually go and spend years and hours of your life into it. Yeah.
No, I think that's definitely, it's interesting because a lot of times you think, oh, I have to go it alone, or, well, I don't have the time to find an advisor, who's going to want to help me or who's going to lend a hand. And I think that more often than not, you'll find a lot of people that are willing to give you feedback or be a sounding board or give you advice or help out, or you can find a founder or co-founder or someone else. But there's a myriad of different ways to get that mentorship that a lot of times it makes it so that you're able to get that much farther along, that much quicker, and not make as many mistakes. So I definitely think that's a
Yeah.
great piece of advice.
Yeah, and also like strategic advisors, right? So if there are people in your industry and that know your industry really well, they understand what you're trying to solve. I think that's one way of approaching it. And then the other way, having advisors that on things that you know you're not good at and you need hand holding. So like, for me, coming from healthcare, having someone from healthcare was really good, but also having someone from finance strategy, like that was really helpful. And then later on, I was able to find an expert in technology as well. So just like having a well-rounded team is really important.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. So with that, as we wrap up the episode, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, connect up to you, or find out more?
Yes, for sure. So our website is, well, the name of the company is Prompt Health, prompthealth.ca or prompthealth.co. And it's also in the App Store, Prompt Health. It's open in Canada right now, but we'll open it in US soon. And we are also on every social media platform. We're very active on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn and Clubhouse, TikTok, everywhere, YouTube, you name it. We're everywhere. Yeah. So it's
Awesome.
easy to, yeah.
Well, I definitely encourage people to reach out to connect. If you can use their services, definitely do so. And otherwise, you can make a new best friend. So in all the cases, thank you for coming on the podcast. Now, for all of you that are listeners, if you have your own journey to tell and you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, we'd love to have you. Feel free to go to inventiveguest.com and apply to be on the show. A couple more things. Make sure to, as a listener, make sure to like, subscribe, and share, because we want to make sure that everybody finds out about all of our awesome episodes. And last but not least, if you ever need help with patents, trademarks, or anything else to do business, feel free to go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat. Well, thank you again, Hedieh, for coming on. It's been it's been a pleasure, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. This was great.
Absolutely.